Hi everyone, warm welcome to our next Coder meetup on medical AI for public good. My name is Leonard Niemer, I'm one of the co-founders of N3XTCODER, and I'm very excited to welcome you all for our virtual meetup tonight. With me, we have great guests. We have Professor Dr. Daniel Fürstenau and Professor Dr. Felix Biesmann with us, both in Berlin. Hi to you, over to you. Good to have you with us tonight. We will soon join you and have an interview together where we will talk about medical AI for public good, our big topic tonight. What will follow afterwards, we will have an interview for around about 30 minutes. And then we're going to hear from our friend Ashir. She is the winner of the EIT Help Alumni Hackathon that we had last month. And she's going to present her project, Canary Sentinel. So 45 minutes, full power, lots of topics. I hope you're all ready to go. Daniel, Felix, are you ready? There's a thumbs up. I think that's a good sign. So what will happen? And some of you, you have joined our meetups before. You know we'll make it interactive. On the right-hand side in your browser, you see our Slido tool. Please make sure of the questions, the Q&A functionality. Whenever there is a good question and it fits into our interview, I'll pick it up and ask our experts about their opinions. But once in a while, we'll also ask you, the audience, a live poll and ask you for your answers. I think we're curious to hear from you as well. So I'm ready to go. I would say we'll jump into the interview, and my great pleasure, Daniel and Felix, to have you with us. Daniel, you're professor, assistant professor of information system, digital transformation, IT infrastructure at FU Berlin. And Felix, you're professor of data science at the Beuth University of Applied Science, also in Berlin. Definitely two experts in the field of IT, data, and artificial intelligence. So warm welcome, good to have you with us tonight.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you. Hi.
So shall we start with that little live poll? I mean, we're going to talk about artificial intelligence. As I said, I would like to directly jump in and ask our audience one question. And it's a little bit controversial. When you think of artificial intelligence, bigger risks or bigger opportunities for society? And I think this will also be the question for Daniel and Felix that we are going to pick up in a second. I want to hear your thoughts. So in the first part, I really want to talk about AI and get your sense. How do you see and how do you perceive AI? So let's start with this. What do you think? What do you think will our audience answer?
Feelings, yeah. So for me, I think it's definitely more of a potential. So I think it's discussed as a general purpose technology, and that's how I see it as well. So it's an underlying enabler of different business models, different processes that are disrupted, and so from that perspective, it's definitely a lot of potentials. Although we need to be careful on how we do it.
So I'm just looking at the results, Felix, before I get your feedback. So we have 78% who say bigger opportunities, 22% who right now say bigger risks. Felix, how do you see this? Do you agree with Daniel or?
Yes, so I definitely see a lot of opportunities in that field because we need healthcare. A lot of the divisions of healthcare are notoriously understaffed, and I think AI can really help to ramp up people more quickly into the job, or to basically it helps to scale up human resources or capabilities. That said, I also see the risks in that in healthcare when you compare healthcare data to other types of data, like for instance, I don't know, what people were shopping or a bank transaction, like people often use encryption protocols that are difficult to decrypt. But for healthcare data, even if it takes like 20 years to decrypt that data, that could be a risk that other types of data don't have. So even your healthcare records might even be, it could be problematic if it, even if it takes 10 years to brute force the decryption, basically. So there are some risks that are very specific to the healthcare domain that we need to pay attention to. But I also do see the potential. Yeah.
So that basically means in 10 years, nobody cares about my shopping data anymore and my finance data. Is that what you're saying? Daniel, you wanted to add on to this?
Yeah, I just wanted to add on the potential side. I also see that when we talk to people now about especially nursing care, there's so many like processes, very specific ones where AI and AI-based scoring systems could help to transform care and increase quality on one side, but also make it more efficient. And that together is such a great potential for many of the very specific processes.
Mm-hmm. Before we jump really into the field of medical AI, just let's maybe take one step back and think about the big picture. You mentioned in shopping, in financial transactions, like where are the areas where you see the big advancements, maybe also the big money going into? I mean, autonomous driving is a big topic where all the big players are putting a lot of effort into this. So what are the areas out there? Maybe, yeah, give us a brief overview. Maybe Daniel, you want to start first?
Yeah, sure. So from my perspective, it's every kind of process that has some decision in it. Firstly, right? So once you have decisions, there's the potential for AI, and I think we definitely see a lot of areas like image recognition where a lot of process has been made already. And what I think is that there's more and more also routine data from transaction that is now used to do research on it. So every platform-based business model essentially has the potential to use AI for disrupting or for creating new opportunities. You know? So so healthcare is one area, financial services is another area, e-commerce is another area. There's essentially every kind of tech area. So every normal business area that becomes a tech area is then prone to become AI infused.
So you mentioned image recognition, the famous examples of that the AI is able to identify cats on pictures, but it goes way beyond this, right? So let's maybe shift into the field of medical AI, like what is happening there. I know image recognition there, of course, plays a fundamental role, but maybe Felix, over to you. You give us a few more insights.
Yeah, I do agree with Daniel. So image recognition technology has, there was tremendous progress throughout the past years. And I think also in healthcare, well, there's obviously, diagnostic tools for imaging, like MRT images. That's where I see AI, really has potential. But there's also image recognition technologies or use cases in healthcare that we wouldn't think about. And this is more like, so, I mean, I often see the main potential of AI not in, one killer application, but it's more like these tiny little, things in these processes, when you have electronic health records that are on paper and they need to, be put in a database. We do see a lot of these data products or services, cloud service providers that provide now image recognition technology, a PDF or like a scanned version of a form, and extract the structured data and put it in a database. And I think it's these small bits where AI can really help people to make things way more efficient than before. And it's these boring tasks that humans actually don't want to do. Nobody wants to type something in a database form. So that's where I see a lot of potential for AI in healthcare.
Yeah, it's super interesting. Maybe just to add on also from our experience, we've just done some work in the field of financing for social impact, social finance, and there's that one big problem of matchmaking. Daniel, you want money, I'm the investor. How do we make sure? So expectation of technologies, yes, that's the magic solution. We bring it together, but reality is maybe more on the little details, as you said, Felix, like checking PDFs, making sure documents are ready, processes are in place. As you call it, maybe the boring things. Is that also something, a mismatch between expectations and reality? Like people experiencing, like imagining AI is that fancy thing taking over the world, but it's just also that small gradual steps. How do you see this?
I think it's a common misperception, I would say. So I think it starts really with very small tasks and very small processes. And I think the overall kind of prerequisite is like having data to train models. And I think this is a very important topic that needs to be kind of considered also when thinking about AI. So you need something to learn with. And that's very important. For instance, like these different data sources that now become available from sensors, from biodata, from routine data. There's the need and a lack for data. So that's an important topic as well.
Yeah, I think let's elaborate on this, because I know, Felix, that's also your point to say, okay, the data is the basis for the algorithms to work with. How is the situation when it comes to medical data? I mean, Daniel, you mentioned different sources coming together. Are we at a stage where we're making good use of data that is out there? Do we harness the potential of data, or are we still far away from that?
Yeah, so I think we're making huge progress on that front, but I also feel that oftentimes, even when we think there is a lot of data, the data might not be the right type of data, or not in the best shape for building AI tools. And so oftentimes when you have these scandals, epic fails of AI technology, usually the AI, like the neural network or whatever tool you use, didn't do anything wrong. Usually the mistakes or the problems are on the side of the data. And so this data quality issue is really it's a problem throughout the entire world of machine learning or AI, but it becomes even more important in the field of healthcare. So as soon as decisions, if your life depends on a decision of an AI system, you really want to make sure that the data quality was meets the highest standards. And this is something that's very difficult to test. So in general, AI systems are very difficult to test. And the best way of testing these systems is testing the data quality, essentially. And it's not a simple task. It's not easy to automate. And we do need to be aware of the fact that if we don't feed the best data to our systems to train AI healthcare systems, we could face devastating consequences. So data quality should be a first-class citizen when it comes to AI in healthcare.
Right.
Yeah, and Daniel, as you mentioned, the data comes from lots of different sources, so not just the obvious personal health data, but sensor data, air quality data, GPS data, all these things come together. Do we see good solutions already that make use of the, let's say, the basket of data and the potential?
I think we see more and more solutions that build data platforms and that bring together different data sources, such as in radiology or so, to share images. There's more data becoming available. Also in ICU units, we saw a very big data set emerging recently, but these are limited examples, I would say, right? So it's not a norm. It's more like, it's just like outliers currently that we have this data available. And even there, it's not easy to access this data. So to become available to work with this data, it's often challenging to kind of to go through the process to eventually access it. And I think this is an important point that should also be considered, because like in the field, we don't talk about like everything in the field where data is very scattered and very like limited, but we talk about like these very good examples that I just mentioned, like in radiology or in the IC unit data set. And we need these kind of data sets, right? These gold standard data sets, and may need more of them in healthcare to actually work with.
The gold standard of data sets. In the end, data is money, right? So data is somehow gold. Are you worried that we see somehow data monopolies, which would be contradicting to the mission to provide better healthcare, to provide better care for people? Is that something that you observe? Felix, how do you see this?
Yeah, so I think we should really emphasize the aspect of self-determination or governance of like these. A patient should own their patient records, right? So and because it's so difficult to build these systems in a way that is safe, not many companies can do that, and that's why I think it's really important to make sure that we don't end up with data monopolies, because maybe, I mean, if we're talking about genome data, I mean, in 20 years we could maybe do a lot of things. We could maybe predict a lot of different things from that data that we cannot now, or maybe if you collect enough data, then you can detect or predict things that you cannot predict from a small amount of data. So it's really important that we, that researchers build systems or build algorithms that ensure that patients own their data, and that they, that patients decide what can be done with their data and what not, and when.
Yeah.
But that certainly is not only a question of algorithms. There's also a question of regulations, right, which are pretty strict. It depends on country, but Germany rather strict. So what is the role of regulations in that process?
I mean, in a way, regulation is very important, right? Because we need, if data is used in healthcare, we need good regulation to make sure that it's appropriately used, right? So it should be regulated. There should be an ethics votum when you collect data on some minority group doing something. So it should be very clear what kind of, under what standards it's kind of collected, and also under which standards it is used, right? So which licenses apply, and who can use that data for what purpose. And I think both aspects are important, ethics and regulation.
And yeah, how it can be used. I think this would be an interesting question, the open source aspect of certain data. Like, can certain data be made available for public good? And I mean, that's also the topic of our meetup tonight. That's why I would do a little poll with the audience. I think that works pretty well. So everybody hop over to Slido again. Question for you: should medical data be a public good? Yes or no? Easy question, easy answer, right? You just have two options to choose from. While the votes come in, Daniel and then Felix, I want to hear from you as well. How do you see this? I mean, first of all, you also have to answer with yes or no. Daniel.
Yes, but.
I knew it. Okay, Felix, how about you?
Probably also yes, but.
That's good. It was not on the option list. Next time I'll make sure we put it on the option list. So, let's take a look. Should medical data be a public good? Yes, 70%. No, 30%. So still 1/3 of the people saying no, it should not be. We do a follow-up question in a second. So how do you see this? So what about the but in the yes? Daniel, you tell me.
So I think we had this discussion in the Corona context, right? So whether you should be forced to give away your data, right? So do we really want this? And I think we have to balance the societal interest here also with the individual interest, right? So there's a societal interest in collecting data about cases, and then making predictions and better informing certain high-risk groups. On the other hand, we have a very personal interest in not giving away certain data for certain purposes. And I think it really needs to be balanced, and there should be a discussion about that. But essentially, the societal good is something like in vaccination or so. The societal good is something that is very important here as well, and should be really also balanced against individual interest.
Yeah, totally. Felix, how do you see this? The balance of societal interest and individual interest?
Yeah, that's a great point, and I fully agree with that. I mean, we have, it should be democratically legitimized, the way data is collected and shared. And my but was focusing, my but in the yes but part was focusing more on the technological aspects. So it's important that people trust that technology. I do think that we are at a point where we can build systems that are both private and can be private and allow for training AI systems, And it's important to make sure that people trust that technology. And I think if we use the right technology, we can make sure that data is used responsibly for public good, and people can still, trust that technology and be sure that their data is still, that their privacy is preserved and all these things.
I mean, super interesting point. How do we make sure that people trust the technology? I mean, let's say the average Mr. Meyer, he might not have that understanding. Even if you have, I mean, it's really difficult to assess. And I think we see a good example now with the Corona Warn app. It's all out there. The code is there. But even then, how do you make sure that trust, that you actually can build trust? How do we overcome this? Will we?
Well, I mean, generally, trust in machine learning, that's a difficult problem in itself, because, depending on the data that you put in the system, different things could come out. And, explainable AI or XAI is a huge field of research that is, just emerging. But, independent of that, the point of technology acceptance is, it's challenging. I think it's a task that we as a society as a whole need to work on. We need researchers from the tech field, but also researchers from all other fields to try and work out a solution that everybody's happy with and that everybody can trust. And I think the Corona app was a great example. I mean, we had the people from CCC who consulted this process, and in the end, the Corona app is now is built in a decentralized fashion, and I think that's a great example of how trust can be built.
It's interesting. So maybe also the solution is that it's not about trusting the technology, but the, let's say, system that you build around it, the ecosystem that you build around it. Because again, like, I will not look at the source code of the Corona Warn app prior using it, but I probably trust in certain institutions' regulations. Is that the way? Daniel, I see you nodding. So how do you see this?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like, especially in the medical field, we do have certification processes for medical products, right? And I think it's similarly applying here, that if we build technology that where decisions or lives depend on it, it should be trusted. And one way of building trust is, for instance, certification, having labels to do that. There are other ways to build trust, and we need to explore the different options to build trust in order to make sure that these technologies that are used here are used responsibly, right?
Totally. There was even a second part of the question where we already dived too much into detail. So the first part was, should medical data be a public good? And we had round about 65% saying yes. Second question, follow-up question for all of you. Are you willing to share your medical data for public good? Again, easy answer, yes or no. Daniel, you know the game, yes or no? Are you willing to share your medical data for public good?
Well, if I'm first, I would say yes. Yes.
Okay, that's a clear answer. Felix, how about you?
Yes, but of course that depends on the way the data is shared. But it's one of the most interesting dilemmata in this entire field.
Yeah.
Good that you didn't ask me. I would have said yes as well. I'm willing. I see bigger benefits because, again, I would also be happy. And Daniel, I think that was a great point, the individual part and the society part. Even just from a very selfish point of view, I think it would be super interesting to get more insights about what's going on, because in the end, this is something that I would individually benefit from, and then also societal. So what do our viewers say? Are you willing to share your medical data for public good? 73% said yes. So very clear. I mean, that's a strong statement. It should be public. They are willing. So last part of our discussion, how do we get there? Who wants to go first? Daniel, do you have a good idea? So how do we overcome this challenges that we face in making medical data available and use them in the right way?
I think we should work on it, and I think there's events, a lot of events also. So what I find really cool is that there are more and more like ways of really engaging with the topic, right? While you were previously you were essentially accepting what's there, and we had a lot of research about barriers to data sharing and how hard it is. We're now starting to really work on the issue, and I think again Corona is a good example where millions of people have started working on the topic. And so like these groups here like N3XTCODER and Hacking Health and like all these events that help changing something, and I think there should be more of it. And there should be forums to start with building.
Felix, what's your way forward then?
Yeah, so getting back to what was mentioned earlier, I think data availability and data quality will be key to building successful AI applications for healthcare. So I think we do see a lot of this happening right now. So there are a lot of research projects in that direction, and the government is spending quite some money on it. But I think one aspect that was, it could be maybe emphasized more in terms of governmental funding is, we probably do need data infrastructure. So this is something that we cannot just always buy from, So if we want people to trust the infrastructure for healthcare data, we need to, basically make sure that it's, government approved, and that the government, basically has open data structures, or at least that it's built by researchers and backed by the government. So, and it's not all private, basically. That's, I think, important.
Interesting. So we hear kind of a call to action for the government, and we talked about regulations. We have in Europe GDPR, and that's something we also talked about. I mean, some see it as like a constraint and a burden. I mean, extra work. Could that also be something that, let's say, medium term will be somehow a competitive advantage of Europe compared to other regions in the world, maybe compared to the US, compared to China, the way how we handle data, maybe even in a more restrictive way? Well, what's your point on this?
Yeah. So I do see that. It's important that researchers work on algorithms and technology that allows to share data in a safe way. And federated learning, privacy-preserving learning strategies. So I think it's important to invest in these topics, and this is actually happening right now. So we do see major companies investing in that type of research, and they share that with the scientific community, and we see a lot of government funding going in that direction. So I think that's a good thing, and this is something that all other countries will benefit from, of course.
Just one more point to add on this great point. So I would think from a domain perspective, it would also be important. So there's a lot of different incentives in different parts of the healthcare system, right? And we should also help to break up these silos by creating the right incentive structures for people to work together in an integrated fashion and to create processes that are value-based and that essentially put quality first and quality in relation to how efficient things are. And so these different sectors in the healthcare systems with very different interests, I think it would be also important if we want to arrive at these data structures and data infrastructures, that we also help to build the complementary organizational structures that enable these data structures to be built and to thrive, to flourish.
Yeah, totally. And maybe the last part, I'm looking also at some of the questions that come from our audience. And I think it's interesting when we jump back to machine learning and the algorithms and how they work. There's a question from Ashir. What about explainability? Do you believe that machines need to explain more the decisions and how they make these decisions? Some question. And the second one, going slightly different direction, when you speak of marginalized groups, what is your view on bias in machine learning? Maybe Felix, over to you.
Yeah, so thanks. This is actually a topic that I've been working on myself for the last couple of years, and we did conduct a lot of experiments on this. Where so the general narrative is that the better you explain what a machine learning model would say, the more people trust it. And I think what I want to add on this is we need the right level of trust. We need to calibrate the trust when people are using these tools. For instance, we don't want a doctor to ignore machine learning predictions just because the doctor thinks, oh, I've been doing this for 20 years. I mean, what can this thing tell me? This can be bad for the patient. On the other hand, we don't want people to blindly follow these predictions. So if we have, young doctors that, just think, oh, that machine will probably know better. So what we see in our experiments is that the more transparent these things, the better the explanations, or the more transparent these machine learning predictions are, the more likely people are to follow them, even when they are wrong. And this is a problem. In the healthcare domain, it's even worse than in other domains. And that's one finding. The other point of bias, I see this as, so when machine learning models fail, it's most of the cases are due to bias in the data, and this is a huge problem, especially in the healthcare domain. And there are lots of studies that show this. I think it's even more important when you think about people maybe don't want to share their data. If you have, I don't know, insurances, if you get a lower premium, if you share your data, this will impose a strong bias on the data. You will not have data from wealthy people, and this creates really bad biases in the data. So to me, it's really one of these data quality problems that should be addressed, along with all these other things. Trust in these healthcare data infrastructure systems is also key to unbiasing the data sets.
And maybe just directly a follow-up question, because you mentioned getting the patient involved, building trust, and there's a question that comes here from the audience. In order to develop patient-public trust in the use of data, should we get them more involved, like really get the patient involved in using the system, but also maybe in the development process? I think, is that also the key?
I think from my perspective, patient involvement is one of the most important points here, and I think there's great examples out there of patient involvement and patient-centric approaches, where you actually define what is good quality healthcare and how to also measure it, and also use technology and digitalization to essentially measure what is life quality, what is good quality of care, not just the medical outcomes, but on a very personal level, how do people profit from this solution? And it would be essential to go in that direction, and like to make the guidelines that we have basically value-based, and make them based on these digital tools, in order to see how the patient actually profits from the solutions. And yeah, that's one aspect. I think the other aspect is the patient engagement during the development, and I think this is also a very important point.
Yeah, it's super interesting. Maybe also two sides of the coin: to get the patient involved in order to build trust, but also to get the patient involved in order to build the digital tools, the systems, maybe in a slightly different way. I think this could also be the other big benefit, right? That you do something that directly benefits patients. And I think it's an interesting point, because, as I said before, and that's maybe also the link to our next speaker, we had the EIT Health Hackathon, Building Resilient Societies. And I think one of the key elements also for the jury was the aspect of patient involvement. How much are they involved? Jerry, you probably have to put yourself on mute for a second, because we hear an echo. But good to have you with us. Maybe Daniel and Felix, last question. So from the EIT Health Hackathon into the future, we have our AI for Care Hackathon coming up, 31st of July. What are your expectations for the hackathon?
So we're looking forward to very interesting solutions and teams, and we want to work on actual data. I think this is will be great to involve different perspectives and people from different backgrounds in order to create or first identify what is possible in underserved areas such as nursing care, but on the other hand also what are current obstacles that future research needs to overcome in order to build better solutions and fixing nursing care.
Felix, what are your expectations?
Yeah, bringing together people from different fields and building some great prototypes maybe.
Okay, that's cool. We'll do that for sure. So I'll see you again July 31st on our AI for Care Datathon. It was great to have you with us. So now time for you to enjoy Berlin summer, and we will hand over to Ashir. Ashir, warm welcome.
Hello, hi there.
Hi. As I said before, you have been the winner of our EIT Health Alumni Hackathon with Canary Sentinel. So we had 1 day, full work, full swing. And I think now your opportunity to present what you are actually doing. So I would say warm welcome. The stage is all yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm going to try to share my window, and I hope you can see it.
Yes, it's loading. We're getting there.
Awesome. Okay. So when you guys are ready, just give me a shout.
I'm ready. I'm ready awesome. When you're ready.
Okay. So first of all, thank you very much for having me on here. It's a very exciting time for us, and I just want to talk to you very quickly about what we built, why we built it, and who we are. So very quickly, we are a startup that's based out of London in the UK, but we're a very distributed team. We are a technology company, and we focus on building solutions that would enable a better quality of life through health monitoring and being able to alert people at the onset of illness. And this is especially very important at this point in time, given that we're all dealing with a global pandemic of the sorts we haven't seen in centuries, really. The last time was the Spanish flu. We're seeing, almost 11 million people infected with C19, COVID-19, SARS-CoV-2. We're seeing, deaths, people losing friends, family, grandparents. Heck, I mean, Italy, they talk about an entire generation being wiped out. And then we've got this really interesting number here about the people who've recovered. What does recovery even mean? Do we even know what the symptoms are? No, we don't. So what does recovery mean, right? I mean, I think that's a really big question that's hanging out there in the balance. And, from the time we did this fantastic hackathon and we've been thinking about this product for a while, what we learned is, also talking about this data bridge, is the fact that this disease is not going away. And I'm taking this opportunity to talk about this because it's important. It's going to be with us for a very long time. And it's not just what you're seeing today, but this disease also has a long tail, meaning that there are people who are suffering even from SARS-CoV-1, H1B1, if you remember that old chestnut, even today. So it becomes really, really important to monitor people from now, people who've been exposed or people who are at risk of being exposed. So what we've done to be able to enable that is to create a contactless, continuous monitoring device. And this is targeted at people outside of the healthcare system. So if you're in hospital, you're okay actually, because you've got a nurse who comes and does obs about 4 times a day. You've got all of these medical grade devices that are beeping and bleeping everywhere because they're constantly tracking you. But imagine you're sat at home because you have a couple of symptoms. You got a test. It was positive, negative, who knows? I mean, the tests are not accurate. But you're sitting at home and you're scared. You're scared because you're coughing. You're scared because you can't taste, you can't breathe. And you want to know that when you do collapse, if you collapse, help is going to be there. Help is going to be there in that 15-minute window that you probably have. And that's why health monitoring becomes really, really important. So we want to make sure that the devices that we develop are actually capable and affordable and accessible and are available to the wider public. The pandemic isn't restricted to people with chronic conditions. The pandemic is something that's going to affect us all if it hasn't already. And therefore, we want to make something that anyone can buy. And we've developed a personal biosensor, a watch, basically, watch form factor, that's able to track your key vital signs. Now, what we've also done is that we have a scanning application that allows for remote monitoring of vital signs, assessments. So our app enables anybody to download it on their phone, hold it in front of their face, 30 seconds. The AI, it's an AI basically. It analyzes regions of interest on your skin, and it's able to give you your vitals. We also have a questionnaire, a chatbot, which is able to ask you certain questions depending on what we're trying to assess, really. So if it's COVID, then it takes you through the list of CDC, WHO guidelines and questions. And then finally, what we offer you, the customer, the nurse, the electronic health record, whatever it is that the data is actually funneling into, your vitals. Break it down, all the key vitals that are going to be important to understand what your health score is, and what your COVID risk score is, and what your vulnerability score is. That last bit is actually very, very important, especially if you're a paramedic, or if you're sick, or if you have a chronic condition, because it basically talks about how fast you're going to clinically deteriorate and how fast you actually need help. Our biosensing device is, we think, pretty robust given its price point. It retails at 40 pounds. I live in the UK, so I say pounds, 40 euros. And we worked extremely hard to make sure that the device that we've accessed is close to medical grade accuracy. We're not a medical device. We don't have certification. That in itself is a huge loop that needs to be, jumped through if you want to get there. So we try to make sure that the data that we access is as accurate as we possibly can get through a device like this. So that's really important. The picture that you see of the application is essentially the mobile app that I just talked about. And it's been clinically tested, so we're quite confident in its performance. But again, this is where it gets really, really tricky, because it's all about functional testing. If you don't have enough light on your face, if you're not holding the device in the right position, blah, 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 it really throws everything off. So that's why any kind of data you're collecting from any device has to be able to be replicable. And that is really, really tough, especially when you're in the everyday environment and talking to people like you and me, basically. And our algorithms look for certain things like your cardiovascular score, your risk score, and so on and so forth. Here we're just talking a little bit about how we do it. We use a system called transdermal optical imaging technology, big mouthful. Happy to talk about it a bit later. But it's using light waves, basically, to measure blood flow under your skin. And all of us have a very unique footprint around that. Extracts the values and then is able to assess them using algorithms. And all of this is then presented in a format, which is like a dashboard. And it really depends on who the customer is. If you're a company that wants to monitor the health of its employees, then because of data privacy, data protection, we can't go into too much detail, obviously. Whereas if you're a medical practitioner, then you do need that data and you do need the granularity of all of it. But again, this is not a medical grade device, meaning that the data needs to have tolerances built into it, where there could be margin of error. And the AI needs to be able to understand what the margin of error is based on particular baselines, as well as the performance of the device. Lots of things to think about. The chatbot is essentially a way to converse. This goes back to patient-led care. We believe that the best value from a qualitative perspective, not quantitative, this is quantitative, but telling you that I'm nauseous is qualitative. I can't use a device to measure my level of nausea. It just doesn't happen. So when you triage somebody, they tell you how you feel, tell me on a scale of 1 to 10 and all of that stuff, qualitative. And the way we try to engage with the patient or the user is through a means that's conversational, because UI, UX, the user interface, the user experience has to be superhuman. I mean, not superhuman, but very, very human. So we've got a couple of POCs that are going on at the moment in London. These are just functional testing. This is just to put the product out there, because I think, going back to a point that was made earlier, it's all about money, funding. Funding has to come from somewhere. And it always goes into this loop of, is your product validated in a healthcare setting? That takes money. Do you have a large enough statistical cohort of people? That takes money. So we're trying to see how we could actually put a stake in the ground and say, you know what, actually, let me show you how it works. Let me try to collect as much of indicative data to show you the value of what this technology can do, and then put it out there, which is why hackathons that was just announced today are absolutely essential to be able to do this, to actually back it up with actual data sets coming from real people. So it's all very exciting, and I'm extremely pleased to have this opportunity. And yeah, and we won. It's brilliant. What more can I say, really? Thank you.
Great, thanks, Ashir. You won. Yes, I see the excitement. I think really interesting. Maybe 2-3 follow-up questions would be nice, because you talked about data accuracy on the one hand side, data privacy, data security. We talked a lot now with Felix and Daniel about this. How do you see this? How do you make sure that you cover data privacy, data security? Do you feel this is something that limits users from using your product?
Of course. I mean, it's always a sticking point, because we talk about who owns the data. Is it anonymized? Is it encrypted? Who can you share it with? Who can't you share it with? Which regime are you under? Are you GDPR? Are you HIPAA? Are you this? Are you that? As a startup, we're not Philips. We don't have the money to sit there and pay tons and tons of money to lawyers and this and that and try to create these huge cybersecure repositories. So for us, it's really difficult. I believe, my personal point of view, the way out of this is synthetic data, completely de-anonymized. Give it to people like us who are building the algorithms, who have to prove it out. And, let's do our thing. And then if you want to put it in the real world, then we can follow all of these different steps of privacy and anonymization and so on and so forth. Because oftentimes I don't need identifiers. I certainly don't need to know that you're Leo. It doesn't matter to me, or where you live and how you do and what you do. But when you do an app sign up, it's the app store that requires that information, not me, right? So there's so many of these complicated. Google is sitting on it all, actually, or Apple. And the rest of us get a bad, hit for that. So it's a sticky point, but it can be solved.
Yeah, totally interesting point. And maybe I'm not Leo, maybe I'm Simon, so that is a secret. Who knows?
Who knows?
But follow-up question on this, and you said it's kind of resource intense. Now, especially in the context of COVID-19, we see a lot of solutions popping up. Everybody's trying to develop a solution as quickly as possible. Do you see approaches where startups, organizations really join forces and say, hey, wait, we're doing something similar. Why not merge this? How do you perceive this? Do you see other players in the field who could be a good partner, who are not your partner yet?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's definitely a great way to scale. And I think, if anything, this pandemic has opened up the channels of communication and cooperation globally. There's just no question. I think there are certain companies that are set up to know how to work with startups, and it's not the case for everybody, because the question of IP comes in. So if you give me X, hundreds of thousands to do something, I do that something, but then who owns that something? Because to a couple of hundreds of thousands to a Pfizer or somebody is actually not very much. But to me, it's a question of survival. That will then put me on the route to be able to increase my valuation and make money and get acquired or continue and be very successful. So it needs to be an equitable model. And I think this is where this public-private partnership becomes really important. If there was a way for, and the EU does have a lot of funding, it certainly does, there's no question, but it is so fiercely competitive, because you also have the Pfizers fighting for the same money, and the academics and everybody else. So to your question, I think it would be great. And I think when there is, I guess, some sort of a corporate responsibility pot of money where that enterprise doesn't really care if the startup gets to keep that money and the IP, and it is about propping each other up to be able to fight for the better world and the better good, then that would make sense.
So what's your way forward now with Canary? So what are your plans for the coming month? I think it's quite fast, quite competitive. So what do you actually plan to do?
Yeah, so my plan is to do this next hackathon in the next couple of months. I think the thing I'm trying to do right now is trying to raise enough funds to be able to provide my device to people, to patients, because I'm a big believer in patient-led care. I think a patient is the best person to be able to help us develop what we need to develop. The other thing that we certainly need is to become part of these big research programs that are going on at the moment across the world, right from academia to hospitals and so on and so forth. And I think that's going to give us the validation. And of course, we need help. We need development help. This is such an important time right now. And the more people who can get behind this and help us accelerate it, the better.
So quite a lot of work to do, I guess, on your plate right now. So would be happy to see you at the next hackathon. Ashir, thanks a lot. Good luck. We keep in close contact anyways. I mean, part of the prize money of the hackathon was working together with the N3XTCODER team. So we're looking forward to working together with your team over the course of the next weeks. Thanks a lot again for joining us. I think we're also coming to an end of our little meetup session tonight. So way forward into the future, July 31st, you will all join us hopefully for the AI for Care datathon. This will be a great opportunity. So if you're in the field, if you have a startup that deals with data for medical purposes, for care purposes, if you're a data scientist, if you're a developer, UX designer, UI designer, a product manager, Ashir, you join us as well. So make sure that you hop over to n3xtcoder.org on the website, apply now. And yeah, I wish you all a great evening and enjoy the rest of the day wherever you are around the world. And I'll see you soon at one of the other opportunities. Thanks, everyone. Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.